So here is the first video in the Node 1 avatar facer thing, and we're just going to go over some basic drawing functionality in P5 so we can start drawing shapes and creating our avatar. And then the second video is going to go a little more in depth about custom shapes and rotation. So go ahead and load up the P5 web editor. It's at editor.p5js.org. It's so easy to use, super user-friendly, and lets you really quickly write sketches, preview them, and go ahead and create an account so you can save and export your sketches. And to start, it loads up this kind of base or skeleton of P5. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. Delete it. Be brave. Let's start from scratch. Figure out what's going on here. So to initialize P5 within the JavaScript environment, you use the function setup. So function setup followed by ellipse or parentheses and then curly brackets. So this is telling the computer that we're defining a function called setup, and what's going to happen in setup will be the code that's contained within these two curly brackets. This is the code block. And because we're defining what happens in setup, we include the word function before it. And setup will happen once upon the sketch loading. And then there's another function called draw. It has the same syntax, the parentheses, the curly brackets. And this is your update loop. So this is going to update, 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 update every frame. So what we're doing right now is drawing something static. So we're just going to do everything within setup. So there's this function that's already defined within the P5 library, and it's called create canvas. So we don't need to define it here. We don't need to write the word function in front of it. We just write create canvas. Hello, it gives you little notes, I guess. Create canvas, parentheses, and now the width and the height of our canvas. So go ahead and make it 400 by 400. And that with another parentheses, and then close off this line with a semicolon. So the semicolon indicates that you are at the end of a line. Now, JavaScript will not break. It will not throw an error if you forget one of these semicolons. It's a little more forgiving than other coding languages like that, but still it's good practice to end your lines with a semicolon. So create canvas. And notice that the word C in canvas is capitalized. This is called Camelcase. So when you squish together different words, you can capitalize the first letter of the next word. And that's like a convention for naming in code, and we'll get into more details about that as we define our own functions and variables. So create canvas, and we run this, and whoa, nothing happens because we need to define a color for our canvas. So go ahead and write background and give it a background. I'm going to do 220 or 200. So that value is grayscale from 0 to 255. 255 is white, so this will be a gray. Awesome. If you give it more values, like 3, they will relate to the red, green, and blue properties. So this is now R, G, and B. And that's like a, no idea what color that is. Maybe like a, it's not quite hoop brown, it's red. Well, if you all want to figure out what the name of that color is, well, let me know. Cool. So there's our canvas. There's its background. Now, if we want to draw something to the canvas, we'll look at the reference in a second. You can call the function circle. So circle takes 3 parameters. The first one is the x value. So let's go 0, y value 0, and the third one is the diameter, and I'm going to make that 100. End it with the semicolon, hit render, and there's our circle at the top left. Notice that the coordinates 0, 0 start at the top left, so 0, x here, to the right it gets bigger, and then y gets bigger as you go down. So there's our circle. So I'm just going to scoot it over, look at 100, 100x, 100y, still 100 diameter. So there it is right there. And by default it's white with the stroke that's black. So if we want to change the color and the stroke of this, we can define the fill and the stroke. So let's make the fill, and I'm just going to make it, I don't know, maybe like a darker gray, 50. Run this, and there you go. And so the computers compile code within a code block from top to bottom. So it creates a canvas, sets a background, sets the fill to 50, then draws a circle. So if we move this fill 50 below drawing the circle, the fill is now white because it drew the circle before you told it what color fill you wanted. So I'll put that back up there. You can set the stroke. So the fill should now be dark again, and I'll make the stroke instead of black, I'll make it white. Can also set the stroke weight. Let's make it like 10. Okay, and there's our different looking circle. And then all these things are written in the P5 documentation. So if we go to the P5 documentation, here is the reference for a circle. And it tells you the exact syntax, what it does. So the circle takes 3 parameters, the x, the y, and the diameter. This is the entire reference. It's sometimes a little confusing to navigate. These are like headers, and as you scroll down, they're the different sections. So in color, these setting ones are ones that we've just been looking at. Fill, no fill, oh, no stroke. You can set it to not have a stroke. And then here are the shapes. So we just looked at a circle. If you look at ellipse, ellipse takes a 4th argument. So instead, unlike circle where it's x, y, and then just the diameter, it will take the width and the height. Okay, so back to our plot. So say we want to draw another circle, and let's make this one be a little to the right. So we'll increase the x value. I'm going to make it 300. I'll keep the y value the same, and make it the same. Cool. And if we wanted this to have a different color to it, we would have to set a new fill above when this circle is drawn. So if we wanted it to be a lighter gray, let's make the fill 150. Awesome. And it still has the same stroke because these stroke declarations are still active by the time the compiler draws this circle. Now, once you start to draw a lot of things, you can just a lot of code, and it's all in like computer speak. It doesn't make tons of sense. So it's good for just use comments. Use comments, make notes that you can read that are in an understandable human language, and make sure that the computer doesn't trip up on them, that you can just read them by using comment syntax. So I just did 2 forward slashes and said draw first circle down here, draw second circle. Cool. I'm going to hit run. There we go. So this are notes for us, and it didn't really change our code at all. When you comment something out, the compiler will just skip over it. If we didn't have that commented out and we tried to run this, it would throw an error. And it tells you what line the error is at here in the console, line 5. If you want to comment out chunks of code, you can highlight multiple lines, then hit Command or Control /. You can also comment out chunks of code using a /* to start the comment out block, and then end it with an asterisk and a / again. So have these on either side. Okay, I'm going to run this, and let's see, what time are we at? Almost 10 minutes. So I'm going to wrap up this so we can get into the more complex aspects of drawing. But one thing I want to know is that for this project, I'm recommending that you, instead of like hard coding in the values of your coordinates, and when I say hard coding, I mean you're just setting this to be 100 and it's always going to be 100, is that you make these values relative to the width and the height of the canvas. So that becomes a scale factor. It makes it scalable, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So there's these built-in variables in P5, which are width and height, and they represent the width and the height of this canvas. So the circle we're drawing at 100, 100, 100, and the canvas width is 400. So this is effectively 1/4 of the canvas width. But you know what, to do this, I'm going to like duplicate this code, put it down here, and let's see, why don't we scoot these two down? So this is x, y, so instead of having the y value at 100, let's have it at 300, so they scoot down here. Cool. So these, draw first circle, and I'm just going to say first circle on bottom, draw second circle on bottom. Okay. And make sure everything is properly indented. Indentation, it's important to make your code legible. We'll get into that more later. Okay, so in these first two ones at the top, I'm going to, instead of hard coding these coordinates, and make them relative to the width. So 100 is the same as width divided by 4, and maybe we'll go width times 0.25. And so every time it says 100, we're going to instead make it width times 25. And this 300 here will be width times 0.75. And so if we did that right, nothing should change when we reload it. Great. Now, the reason why you might want to do it like this is because it, well, it's scalable. So if we change the canvas to instead being 400 by 400, let's make it 300 by 300 and run this. Now, these two ones at the top scale down, and these ones at the bottom are now off the canvas. So, I mean, you can just like hard code in the values to start, and then later introduce something that would be like a scale factor. You can just do it from starting. Okay, so the next video, I'll get into custom shapes and rotation, stuff like that, and we'll be looking at okay, we'll start to do this stuff in the next video.